Chapter 20. The family on top of the load, the children and Connie and Rosa Sharon and the preacher were stiff and cramped. They had sat in the heat in front of the coroner's office in Bakersfield while Pa and Ma and Uncle John went in. Then a basket was brought out and the long bundle lifted down from the truck, and they sat in the sun while the examination went on, while the cause of death was found and the certificate signed. Al and Tom strolled along the street and looked in store windows and watched the strange people on the sidewalks. And at last, Pa and Ma and Uncle John came out, and they were subdued and quiet. Uncle John climbed up on the load. Pa and Ma got in the seat. Tom and Al strolled back, and Tom got under the steering wheel. He sat there silently, waiting for some instruction. Pa looked straight ahead, his dark hat pulled low. Ma rubbed the sides of her mouth with her fingers, and her eyes were far away and lost, dead with weariness. Pa sighed deeply. There was nothing else to do, he said. I know, said Ma. She would have liked a nice funeral, though. She always wanted one. Tom looked sideways at them. County? He asked. Yeah. Pa shook his head quickly, as though to get back some reality. We didn't have enough. We couldn't have done it. He turned to Ma. You ain't to feel bad. We couldn't, no matter how hard we tried, no matter what we done. We just didn't have it. Embalming and a coffin and a preacher and a plot of in a graveyard. It would have took 10 times what we got. We done the best we could. I know, Ma said. I just can't get it out of my head what story she said by in a nice funeral. Got to forget it. She sighed deeply and rubbed the side of her mouth. That was a pretty nice fellow in there. Awful bossy, but he was pretty nice. Yeah, Pa said. He gave us the straight talk, all right. Ma brushed her hair back with her hand. Her jaw tightened. We got to get, she said. We got to find a place to stay. We got to work and settle down. No use to letting the little fellows go hungry. That wasn't never Grandma's way. She always ate a good meal and at a funeral. Where are we going? Tom asked. Pa raised his hat and scratched among his hair. Camp, he said. We ain't gonna spend what little left till we get to work. Drive out in the country. Tom started the car and they rolled through the streets and out toward the country, and by a bridge they saw a collection of tents and shacks. Tom said, might as well stop here, find out what's doing and where the work is. He drove down a steep dirt incline and parked on the edge of the encampment. There was no order in the camp. Low gray tents, shacks, cars were scattered about at random. The first house was nondescript. The south wall was made of 3 sheets of rusty corrugated iron, and the east wall a square of moldy carpet tacked between 2 boards. The north wall a strip of roofing paper and a strip of tattered canvas, and the west wall 6 pieces of gunny sacking. Over the square frame, on untrimmed willow limbs, grass had been piled, not thatched, but heaped up in a low mound. The entrance on the gunny sack side was cluttered with equipment. A 5-gallon kerosene can served for a stove. It was laid on its side, with a section of rusty stovepipe thrust in one end. A wash boiler rested on its side against the wall, and a collection of boxes to sit on to eat on. A Model T Ford sedan and a two-wheel trailer were parked beside the shack, and about the camp there hung a slovenly despair. Next to the shack there was a little tent, gray with weathering, but neatly and properly set up, and the boxes in front of it were placed against the tent wall. A stovepipe stuck out of the door flap, and the dirt in front of the tent had been swept and sprinkled. A bucket full of soaking clothes stood on a box. The camp was neat and sturdy. A Model A Roadster and a little homemade bed trailer stood beside the tent. And next there was a huge tent, ragged, torn in strips, and the tiers mended with pieces of wires. The flaps were up, and inside 4 wide mattresses lay on the ground. A clothesline strung along the side bore pink cotton dresses and several pairs of overalls. There were 40 tents and shacks, and beside each habitation some kind of automobile. Far down the line, a few children stood and stared at the newly arrived truck, and they moved towards it. Little boys in overalls and bare feet, their hair gray with dust. Tom stopped the truck and looked at Pa. "She ain't very purty," he said. "Want to go somewheres else?" "Can't go nowhere else till we know where we're at," Pa said. "We gotta ask about work." Tom opened the door and stepped out. The family climbed down from the load and looked curiously at the camp. Ruthie and Winfield, from the habit of the road, took down the bucket and walked toward the willows, where there would be water, and the line of children parted for them and closed after them. The flaps of the first shack parted, and a woman looked out. Her gray hair was braided, and she wore a dirty, flowered Mother Hubbard. Her face was wizened and dull, deep gray pouches under blank eyes, and a mouth slack and loose. Pa said, "Can we just pull up anywheres and camp?" The head was withdrawn inside the shack. For a moment there was quiet, and then the flaps were pushed aside, and a bearded man in shirt sleeves stepped out. The woman looked out after him, but she did not come into the open. The bearded man said, "Howdy, folks," and his restless dark eyes jumped to each member of the family, and from them to the truck and to the equipment. Pa said, "And I just asked your woman if it's all right to set our stuff anywheres." The bearded man looked at Pa intently, as though he had said something very wise and that needed thought. "Set down anywheres? Here in this place?" he asked. "Sure. Anybody own this place that we got to see for we can camp?" The bearded man squinted, one eye nearly closed, and studied Pa. "You want to camp here?" Pa's irritation arose. The gray woman peered out of the burlap shack. "What do you think I was saying?" Pa said. "Well, if you want to camp here, why don't you? I ain't a-stopping you." Tom laughed. He got it. Pa gathered his temper. "I just wanted to know, does anybody own it? Do we got to pay?" The bearded man thrust out his jaw. "Who owns it?" he demanded. Pa turned away. "The hell with it," he said. The woman's head popped back into the tent. The bearded man stepped forward menacingly. "Who owns it?" he demanded. "Who's going to kick us out of here? You tell me." Tom stepped in front of Pa. "You better go take a long good sleep," he said. The bearded man dropped his mouth open and put a dirty finger against his lower gums. For a moment he continued to look wisely, speculatively at Tom, and then he turned on his heel and popped into the shack after the gray woman. Tom turned on Pa. "What the hell was that?" he asked. Pa shrugged his shoulders. He was looking across the camp. In front of the tent stood an old Buick, and the head was off. A young man was grinding the valves, and as he twisted back and forth on the tool, he looked up at the Joad truck. They could see that he was laughing to himself. When the bearded man was gone, the young man left his work and sauntered over. "How are you?" he said, and his blue eyes were shiny with amusement. "I seen you just met the mayor." "What the hell's the matter with him?" Tom demanded. The young man chuckled. "He's just nuts like you and me. Maybe he's a little nutsier than me. I don't know." Pa said, "I just asked him if we could camp here." The young man wiped his greasy hands on his trousers. "Sure, why not? You folks just come across?" "Yeah," said Tom. "Just got in this morning. Never been in a Hooverville before?" "Where's Hooverville?" "This here's her." "Oh, we just got in." Winfield and Ruthie came back, carrying a bucket of water between them. Ma said, "Let's get the camp up. I'm tuckered out. Maybe we can all rest." Pa and Uncle John climbed up on the truck to unload the canvas and the beds. Tom sauntered to the young man and walked beside him back to the car he had been working on. The valve grinding brace lay on the exposed block, and a little yellow can of valve grinding compound was wedged on the top of the vacuum tank. Tom asked, "What the hell is the matter of that old fellow with the beard?" The young man picked up his brace and went to work, twisting back and forth, grinding valve against the valve seat. "The mayor? Christ knows. I guess he's bull simple." "What's a bull simple?" "I guess cops push him around so much he's still spinning." Tom asked, Why would they push a fella like that around?" The young man stopped his work and looked into Tom's eyes. "Christ knows," he said. "You just come. Maybe you can figure it out. Some fella says one thing, and some says another thing. But you just camp in one place a little while, and you see how quick a deputy sheriff shoves you along. He lifted a valve and smeared compound on the seat. But what the hell for? I can't tell you. I don't know. Some says they don't want us to vote, keep us moving so we can't vote, and some says we can't get on relief, and some says if we sat in one place we'd get organized. I don't know why. I only know we get the road all the time. You wait, you'll see. We ain't no bums, Tom insisted. We're looking for work. We'll take any kind of work. The young man paused in fitting the brace to the valve slot. He looked in amazement at Tom. Looking for work, he said. So you're looking for work. What do you think everybody else is looking for? Diamonds? What do you think I wore my ass down to a nub looking for? He twisted the brace back and forth. Tom looked at the grimy tents, the junk equipment, at the old cars, the lumpy mattresses out in the sun, at the blackened cans on the fire-blackened holes where the people cooked. He asked quietly, "Ain't they no work?" "I don't know. Must be. Ain't no crop right here now. Grapes to pick later and cotton to pick later. We're a-movin' on. Soon as I get these here valves ground, me and my wife and my kids, we heard there was work up north. We're shoving north, up around Salinas." Tom saw Uncle John and Pa, and the preacher hoisting the tarpaulin on the tent poles, and Ma on her knees inside, brushing off the mattress on the ground. A circle of quiet children stood to watch the new family get settled. Quiet children with bare feet and dirty faces. Tom said, "Back home some fellas come through with handbills, orange ones, says they need lots of people out here to work the crops." Yet the young man laughed. "They says they need 300,000 folks here, and I bet every damn family has seen them handbills." "Yeah, but if they don't need folks, what'd they go through the trouble putting them things out for? Use your head, why don't you?" "Yeah, but I want to know." "Look," the young man said, "suppose you got a job of work, and there's just one fellow wants a job. You got to pay him what he asks. But suppose there's 100 men." He put down his tool. His eyes hardened and his voice sharpened. "Suppose there's 100 men wants that job. Suppose them men got kids and them kids is hungry. Suppose a lousy dime will buy you a box of mush for them kids. Suppose a nickel will buy you at least something for them kids. And you got 100 men. Just offer 'em a nickel, and why, they'd kill each other, fighting for that nickel. Know what they was paying last job I had? 15 cents an hour. 10 hours for $1.50, and you can't stay on the place. Got to burn gasoline getting there." He was panting with anger, and his eyes blazed with hate. "That's why them handbills was out. You can print a hell of a lot of handbills with what you save paying 15 cents an hour for field work." Tom said, "That's stinkin'." The young man laughed harshly. "You stay here out a little while, and if you smell any roses, you come let me smell too." "But they is work," Tom insisted. "Christ almighty, with all this stuff growin', orchards, grapes, vegetables, I seen it. They got to have men, I seen all that stuff." A child cried in the tent beside the car. The young man went into the tent, and his voice came softly through the canvas. Tom picked up the brace, fitted it in the slot of the valve, and ground away, his hands whipping back and forth. The child's crying stopped. The young man came out and watched Tom. "You can do her," he said. "Damn good thing. You'll need to." "How about what I said?" Tom resumed. "I seen all this stuff growing." The young man squatted on his heels. "I'll tell you," he said quietly. "There's a big son of a bitch of a peach orchard I worked in. Takes 9 men all year round." He paused impressively. "Takes 3,000 men for 2 weeks when them peaches is ripe. Gotta have 'em or them peaches will rot. So what do they do? They send out handbills all over hell. They need 3,000 and they get 6,000. They get them men for what they want to pay. And if you don't want to take what they pay, god damn it, there's 1,000 men waiting for your job. So you pick, and then she's done. Whole part of the country's peaches, all ripe together. When you get 'em picked, every goddamn one is picked, there ain't another damn thing in that part of country to do, and the owners don't want you there no more. 3,000 of you. The work's done. You might steal, you might get drunk, you might just raise hell. And besides, you don't look nice, living in old tents. And it's a pretty country, but you stink it up. They don't want you around, so they kicks you out. They move along. That's how it is. Tom, looking down toward the Joe tent, saw his mother, heavy and slow with weariness, build a little trash fire and put the cooking pots over the flame. The circle of children drew closer, and the calm, wide eyes of the children watched every move of Ma's hands. An old man with a bent back came like a badger out of the tent, snooped near, sniffing the air as he came. He laced his arms behind him and joined the children to watch Ma. Ruthie and Winfield stood near to Ma and eyed the strangers belligerently. Tom said angrily, "Them peaches gotta be picked right now, don't they? Just when they're ripe?" "Of course they do." "Well, suppose them people got together and says, 'Let 'em rot.' Wouldn't be before long the price went up, by God." The young man looked up from the boughs, looked sardonically at Tom. "Well, you figured out something, did you? Come right out of your own head." "I'm tired," said Tom. "Drove all night. I don't want to start no argument. And I'm so goddamn tired I'd argue easy. Don't be smart with me. I'm asking you." The young man grinned. "I didn't mean it. You ain't been here. Folks figured that out. And the folks with the peach orchard figured her out too. Look, if folks get together, there's a leader, got to be. Fellow that does the talking. Well, first time this fellow opens his mouth, they grab him and stick him in jail. And if there's another leader pops up, why, they stick him in jail." Tom said, "Well, a fellow eats in jail anyway. His kids don't. How'd you like to be in and your kids starving to death?" "Yeah," said Tom slowly. "Yeah. And here's another thing. Ever heard of a blacklist? What's that?" "Well, you just open your traps about us folks getting together and you'll see. They take your picture and send it all over. Then you can't get work nowhere. And if you got kids..." Tom took off his cap and twisted it in his hands. "So we take what we can get, huh? Or we starve. And if we get, we starve." The young man made a sweeping circle with his hand, and his hand took in the ragged tents and the rusty cars. Tom looked down at his mother again, where she sat scraping potatoes, and the children had drawn closer. He said, "I ain't gonna take it, goddammit, and I and my folks ain't no sheep. I'll kick the hell out of somebody." "Like a cop?" "Like anybody." "You're nuts," said the young man. "They'll pick you right off. You got no name, no property. They'll find you in a ditch with the blood dried on your mouth and your nose. Be one little line on the paper, you know. Know what it'll say? 'Vagrant found dead,' and that's all. You'll see a lot of them little lines. 'Vagrant found dead.'" Tom said, "There'll be somebody else found dead right alongside this here vagrant." "You're nuts," said the young man. "Won't be no good in that." "Well, what you doing about it?" He looked at the grease-streaked face, and a veil drew down over the eyes of the young man. "Nothing." "Where you from?" "Us? Right near Salsa, Oklahoma. Just get in, just today." "Gonna be around here long?" "Dunno. We'll stay wherever we can get work." "Why?" "Nothing." And the veil came down again. "Gotta sleep up," said Tom. "Tomorrow we'll go out looking for work." "You can try." Tom turned away and moved toward the Joe tent. The young man took up a can of valve compound and dug his finger into it. "Hi," he called. Tom turned. "What do you want?" "I want to tell you." He motioned with his finger, on which a blob of compound stuck. "I just want to tell you. Don't go looking for no trouble. Remember how that Bull Simple guy looked? Fell in that tent up there? Yeah. Looked dumb, no sense. Well, what about him? Well, when the cops come in, and they come in all the time, that's how you want to be. Dumb. Don't know nothing. Don't understand nothing. That's how the cops like us. Don't hit cops. That's just suicide. Be Bull Simple. Let them goddamn cops run over me, and me do nothing? No. Look at here. I'll come for you tonight. Maybe I was wrong. There's still stools around all the time. I'm taking a chance at it, and I got a kid too. I'll come for you, and if you see the cop, why, you're a goddamn dumb okie, see? That's all right if we're doing anything. Don't worry, we're doing something, only we ain't sticking our necks out. A kid starves quick. 3 days for a kid." He went back to his job, spread the compound on a valve seat, and his hand jerked rapidly back and forth on the brace, and his face was dull and dumb. Tom strolled slowly back to his camp. "Bull Simple," he said under his breath. Pa and Uncle John came to the camp, their arms loaded with willow dry sticks, and they threw them down by the fire and squatted on their hams. Got her picked over. Looked pretty good, said Pa. I had to go a long ways for the wood. He looked up at the circle of staring children. Lord God Almighty, he said, where'd you come from? All the children looked self-consciously at their feet. Guess they smelled cooking, said Ma. Winfield, get out here, get out from underfoot. She pushed him out of her way. Gotta make us up a little stew, she said. We ain't ate nothing cooked right since we come from home. Pa, you go up to the store and get some neck meat. Make a little nice stew here. Pa stood up and sauntered away. Al had the hood of the car up, and he looked down at the greasy engine. He looked up when Tom approached. You sure look happy as a buzzard, Al said. I'm just gay as a toad in the spring rain, said Tom. Look at the engine, Al pointed. Pretty good, huh? Tom peered in. Looks all right to me. All right. Jesus, she's wonderful. She ain't shot no oil or nothing. He unscrewed a spark plug and stuck his forehead in the hole. Crusted up some, but she's dry. Tom said, you done a nice job of picking. That's what you want me to say? Well, I sure was scared the whole way, figuring she'd bust down and it'd be my fault. No, you done good. Better get her in shape, 'cause tomorrow we going out looking for work. She'll roll, said Al. Don't you worry none about that. He took out a pocket knife and scraped the points of the spark plug. Tom walked around the side of the tent, and he found Casey sitting on the earth, wisely regarding one bare foot. Tom sat down heavily beside him. Think she's gonna work? What? Them toes of yours. Oh, just sitting here thinking of that. You always get good and comfortable for it, said Tom. Casey waggled his big toe up and his second toe down, and he smiled quietly. Hard enough for a fellow to think without getting himself up to do it. Ain't heard a peep out of you for days, said Tom, thinking all the time. Yeah, thinking all the time. Tom took off his cloth cap, dirty now and ruinous, the visor pointed as a bird's beak. He turned the sweatband out and removed a long strip of folded newspaper. Sweat so much she shrank, he said. He looked at Casey's waving toes. Could you come down from your thinking and listen a minute? Casey turned his head on the stalk-like neck. Listen all the time. That's why I've been thinking. Listen to people talking, and pretty soon I hear the way folks are feeling. Going on all the time. I hear them and I feel them, and they're beating their wings like a bird in an attic. Gonna bust their wings on a dusty window, trying to get out. Tom regarded him with widened eyes, and then he turned and looked at a gray tent 20 feet away. Washed jeans and shirts and a dress hung to dry on the tent guys. He said softly, that was about what I was going to tell you. Ain't you seen already? I seen, Casey agreed. There's an army of us with no harness. He bowed his head and ran his extended hand slowly up his forehead and into his hair. All along I seen it, he said. Every place we stop, I seen it. Folks hungry for side meat, and when they get it, they ain't fed. And when they'd get so hungry they couldn't stand it no more, why, they'd ask me to pray for 'em, and sometimes I used to done it. He clasped his hands around the drawn-up knees and pulled his legs in. I used to think that I'd cut her, he said. Used to rip off a prayer, and all the troubled stick to that prayer like flies on flypaper, and the prayer'd go sailing off, taking them troubles along. But don't work no more, Tom said. Prayer never brought in no side meat. Takes a show to bring in pork. Yeah, Casey said. And Almighty God never raised no wages. These here folks want to live decent and bring up their kids decent. And when they're old, they want to sit on the floor and watch the downing sun. And when they're young, they want to dance and sing and lay together. They want to eat and get drunk and work. That's it. They want to just fling their goddamn muscles around and get tired. Christ, what am I talking about? I don't know, said Tom. Sounds kind of nice. When you think you can get to work and you quit thinking of smell, we got to get to work. Money's about gone. Paul gives $5 to get a painted piece of board stuck up over Grandma. We ain't got much left. A lean brown mongrel dog came sniffing around the tent. He was nervous and flexed around. He sniffed close before he was aware of the two men, and then looking up he saw them, leaped sideways and fled, ears back, bony tail clamped protectively. Casey watched him go, dodging around a tent to get out of sight. Casey sighed. I ain't doing nobody no good, he said. Me or nobody else. I was just thinking I'd go off alone by myself. I'm eating your food and taking up room, and I ain't give you nothing. Maybe I could get a steady job and maybe pay you back some of the stuff you give me. Tom opened his mouth and thrust his lower jaw forward, and he tapped his lower teeth like a dried piece of mustard sauce. His eyes stared over the camp, over the gray tents and the shacks of wheat and tin and paper. Wished I had a sack of Durham, he said. I ain't had a smoke in a hell of a long time. Used to get tobacco in McAllister. Almost wished I was back. He tapped his teeth again. Suddenly he turned on the preacher. Ever been in a jailhouse? No, said Casey. Never been. Don't go away right yet, said Tom. Not right yet. Quicker I get looking for work, quicker I'm gonna find some. Tom studied him with half-shut eyes, and he put on his cap again. Look, he said, this ain't no land of milk and honey like the preachers say. There's a mean thing here. The folks here is scared of us people coming west, and so they get cops out trying to scare us back. Yeah, said Casey, I know. What are you asking me about? What you asked about me being in jail for? Tom said slowly, when you're in jail, you get to kinda sensing stuff. Guys ain't let to talk a hell of a lot together. Two maybe, but not a crowd. And so you get kinda sensy. If something's gonna bust, if a fella go and stir bugs and take a crack at a guard with a mop handle, why, you know it before it happens. And if there's gonna be a break or a riot, nobody don't have to tell you. You're just sensy about it. You know. Yeah? Stick around, said Tom. Stick around till tomorrow anyway. Something's gonna come up. I was talking to a kid up the road, and he's being just as sneaky and wise as a dog coyote, but he's too wise. Dog coyote a minding his own business, and innocent and sweet, just having fun and no harm. Well, there's a hen roost close by. Casey watched intently, started to ask a question, and then shut his mouth tightly. He wiggled his toes slowly, and releasing his knees, pushed his foot so he could see it. Yeah, he said, I won't go right yet. Tom said, when a bunch of folks, nice quiet folks, don't know nothing about nothing, something's going on. I'll stay, said Casey. And tomorrow we'll go out in the truck and look for work. Yeah, said Casey, and he waved his toes up and down and studied them gravely. Tom settled back on his elbow and closed his eyes. Inside the tent he could hear the murmur of Rose Sharon's voice and Connie's answering. The tarpaulin made a dark shadow, and the wedge-shaped light at each end was hard and sharp. Rose Sharon laid on a mattress, and Connie squatted beside her. I ought to help, Mom, Rose Sharon said. I tried, but every time I stirred about, I throwed up. Connie's eyes were sullen. If I'd have known it would be like this, I wouldn't have came. I had to study nights about tractors back home to get me a $3 job. Fella can live awful nice on $3 a day and go to the picture show every night too. Rose Sharon looked apprehensive. You're gonna study nights about radios, she said. He was long in answering. Ain't you? She demanded. Yeah, sure, as soon as I gets on my feet. Get a little money. She rolled up on her elbow. You ain't giving up? No, of course not. But I didn't know there was places like this we got to live in. The girl's eyes hardened. You got to, she said quietly. Sure, I know. Gotta get on my feet, get a little money. Would have been better, maybe stay home and study about tractors. $3 a day they get, and pick up extra money too. Rose Sharon's eyes were calculating. When he looked down at her, he saw her eyes, a measuring of him, a calculation of him. But I'm gonna study, he said, as soon as I get on my feet. She said fiercely. We got to have a house before the baby comes. We ain't gonna have this baby in no tent. Sure, he said, soon as I get on my feet. He went out of the tent and looked down at Ma, crouched over the brush fire. Rosa Sharon rolled on her back and stared at the top of the tent, and then she put her thumb in her mouth for a gag and she cried silently. Ma knelt beside the fire, breaking twigs to keep the flame up under the stew kettle. The fire flared and dropped and flared and dropped. The children, 15 of them, stood silently and watched. When the smell of cooking stew came to their noses crinkled slightly. The sunlight glistened on hair tawny with dust. The children were embarrassed to be there, but they did not go. Ma talked quietly to a little girl who stood inside the lusting circle. She was older than the rest. She stood on one foot, caressing the back of her neck, the back of her leg with a bare instep. Her arms were clasped behind her. She watched Ma with steady, small gray eyes. She suggested, "I could break up some brush if you want me to, ma'am." Ma looked up from her work. "You want to get to ask to eat?" "Yes, ma'am," the girl said steadily. Ma slipped the twigs into the pot, and the flame made a puttering sound. "Didn't you have no breakfast?" "No, ma'am. They ain't no work hereabouts. Pa's in trying to sell some stuff to get gas so we can get along." Ma looked up. "Did none of these here have no breakfast?" The circle of children shifted nervously and looked away from the boiling kettle. One small boy said boastingly, "I did. Me and my brother did. And them two did. 'Cause I seen 'em. We ate good. We are going south tonight." Ma smiled. "Then you ain't hungry. They ain't enough here to go around." The small boy's lips stuck out. "We ate good," he said, and he turned and ran and dived into a tent. Ma looked after him so long that the oldest girl reminded her, "The fire's down, ma'am. I can keep it up if you want." Ruthie and Winfield stood inside the circle, comporting themselves with proper frigidity and dignity. They were aloof and at the same time possessive. Ruthie turned cold and angry eyes on the little girl. He squatted down to break up the twigs from Ma. Ma lifted the kettle lid and stirred the stew with a stick. "I sure am glad some of you ain't hungry. That little fella ain't, anyway." The girl sneered. "Oh, him? He was a braggin'. High and mighty. If he don't have no supper, know what he done? Last night come out and say they got chicken to eat. Well, sir, I looked in whilst they was eatin', and it was fried dough, just like everybody else." "Oh," and Ma looked down toward the tent where the small boy had gone. She looked back at the little girl. "How long you been in California?" she asked. "Oh, about 6 months. We lived in a government camp a while, and then we went north, and when we come back, it was full up. That's a nice place to live, you bet." "Where's that?" Ma asked, and she took the sticks from Ruthie's hands and fed the fire. Ruthie glared with hatred at the older girl. "Over by Weed Patch. Got nice toilets and baths, and you can wash clothes in a tub, and there's water right handy. Good drinking water. And nights the folks play music, and Saturday night they give a dance. Oh, you never seen anything so nice. Got a place for kids to play, and them toilets with paper. Pull down a little jigger and the water comes right in the toilet, and they ain't no cops to come look in your tent anytime they want. And the fellow runs the camp is so polite he comes visiting and talks and ain't high and mighty. I wish we could go live there again." Ma said, "I never heard about it. I sure could use a wash tub, I tell you." The girl went on excitedly. "Why, God Almighty, they got hot water right in the pipes, and you get in under a shower bath and it's warm. You never seen such a place." Ma said, "All full now, you say?" "Yeah, last time we asked it was. Must cost a lot," said Ma. "Well, it costs, but if you ain't got money, they let you work it out. Couple hours a week. Cleaning up and garbage cans, stuff like that. And nights there's music and folks talks together and hot water right in the pipes. You ain't never seen nothing so nice." Ma said, "I sure wish we could go there." Ruthie had stood all she could. She blurted out fiercely, "Grandma died right on top of the truck." The girl looked questioningly at her. Well, she did, Ruthie said, and the coroner got her. She closed her lips tightly and broke up a little pile of sticks. Winfield blinked at the boldness of the attack. Right on the truck, he echoed. Coroner stuck her in a big basket. Ma said, "You shush now, both of you, or you got to go away," and she fed twigs into the fire. Down the line, Al had strolled to watch the valve grinding job. "Looks like you're about through," he said. "Two more." "Is there any girls in this here camp?" "I got a wife," said the young man, "but I got no time for girls." "I always got time for girls," said Al. "I got no time for nothing else." "You get a little hungry, and you'll change." Al laughed. "Maybe, but I ain't never changed that notion yet. Fella I talked to a while, he's with you, ain't he?" "Yeah, my brother Tom. Better not fool with him. He killed a fella." "Oh, did? What for?" "Fight. Fella got a knife and Tom busted him with a shovel." "Did, huh? What'd the law do?" "Let him off 'cause it was a fight." "You don't look like a quarreler." "Oh, he ain't, but Tom don't take nothing from nobody." Al's voice was very proud. "Tom, he's quiet, but look out." "Well, I just talked to him. He didn't sound mean." "He ain't. Just as nice as pie till he's roused, and then look out." The young man ground at the last valve. "Like me to help you get them valves set and the head on?" "Sure, if you got nothing else to do." "Ought to get some sleep," said Al, "but hell, I can't keep my hands out of a tore-down car. Just got to get in." "Well, I'd admire to get a hand," said the young man. "My name's Floyd Knowles. I'm Aljo. Proud to meet you." "Me too," said Al. "Gonna use the same gasket?" "Got to," said Floyd. Al took out his pocket knife and scraped at the block. "Jesus," he said, "they ain't nothing I love about the guts of an Injun." "How about girls?" "Yeah, girls too. Wish I could tear down a Rolls and put her back. I looked under the hood of a CAD 16 one time, and God Almighty, you never seen nothing so sweet in your life. In South, and here this 16 is standing in front of a restaurant. So I lifts the hood, and a guy comes out and says, 'What the hell you doing?' And I says, 'Just looking. Ain't she swell?' And he just stands there. I don't think he ever looked in her before. It just stands there. Rich fella in a straw hat. Got a striped shirt on, and eyeglasses. We don't say nothing. Just look. And pretty soon he says, 'How'd you like to drive her?' Floyd says, 'The hell, sure. How'd you like to drive her?' 'Well, hell, I got my jeans on, all dirty.' I said, 'I'd get her dirty.' 'Come on,' he says, 'just take her around the block.' Well, sir, I sat in that seat, and I took her around the block 8 times, and oh my God Almighty." "Nice?" Floyd asked. "Oh, Jesus," said Al. "If I could have tore her down, why, I'd give anything." Floyd slowed his jerking arm. He lifted the last valve from its seat and looked at it. "You better get used to a jalopy," he said, "'cause you ain't going to drive no 16. He put his brace down on the running board and took up a chisel to scrape the crust from the block. 2 stocky women, bareheaded and barefooted, went by carrying a bucket of milky water between them. They limped against the weight of the bucket, and neither one looked up from the ground. The sun was half down in the afternoon. Al said, "You don't like nothing much." Floyd scraped harder with the chisel. "I've been here 6 months," he said. "I've been scrabbling over this here state, trying to work hard enough and move fast enough to get meat and potatoes for me and my wife and my kids. I run myself like a jackrabbit, and I can't quite make her. There's just ain't quite enough to eat no matter what I do. I'm getting tired, that's all. I'm getting tired way past where sleep rests me, and I just don't know what to do." "Ain't there no steady work for a fella?" Al asked. "No, they ain't no steady work." With his chisel he pushed the crust off the block, and he wiped the dull metal with a greasy rag. A rusty touring car drove down into the camp, and there were 4 men in it, men with brown, hard faces. The car drove slowly through the camp. Floyd called to them. "Any luck?" The car stopped. The driver said, "We covered a hell of a lot of ground. They ain't a hand's work in this here country. We gotta move." "Where to?" Al called. "God knows. We will work this here place over." He let in his clutch and moved slowly down the camp. Al looked after them. Wouldn't it be better if one fellow went alone? Then if there was one piece of work, a fellow'd get it? Floyd put down the chisel and smiled sourly. You ain't learned, he said. Takes gas to get round the country. Gas costs 15 cents a gallon. Them four fellows can't take 4 cars, so each of them puts in a dime, and they get gas. You got to learn. Al! Al looked down at Winfield, standing importantly beside him. Al, Ma's dishing up stew. She says to come get. Al wiped his hands on his trousers. We ain't it today, he said to Floyd. I'll come give you a hand when I eat. No need unless you want to. Sure, I'll do it. He followed Winfield toward the Jode camp. It was crowded now. The strange children stood close to the stew pot, so close that Ma brushed them with her elbows as she worked. Tom and Uncle John stood beside her. Ma said helplessly, I don't know what to do. I gotta feed the family. What am I gonna do with these here? The children stood stiffly and looked at her. Their faces were blank, rigid, and their eyes went mechanically from the pot to the tin plate she held. Their eyes followed the spoon from pot to plate, and when she passed out the steaming plate to Uncle John, their eyes followed it up. Uncle John dug his spoon into the stew, and the banked eyes rose with the spoon. A piece of potato went into John's mouth, and the banked eyes were on his face, watching to see how he would react. Would it be good? Would he like it? And then Uncle John seemed to see them for the first time. He chewed slowly. You take this here, he said to Tom. I ain't hungry. You ain't eat today, Tom said. I know, but I got a stomachache. I ain't hungry. Tom said quietly. You take that plate inside the tent and you eat it. I ain't hungry, John insisted. I'd still see him inside the tent. Tom turned to the children. You get, he said. Go on now. Get. The bank of eyes left the stew and rested wondering on his face. Go on now, get. You ain't doing no good. There ain't enough for you. Ma ladled the stew into the tin plates, very little stew, and she laid the plates on the ground. I can't send 'em away, she said. I don't know what to do. Take your plates and go inside. I'll let 'em have what's left. Here, take a plate in to Rose Sharon. She smiled up at the children. Look, she said, you little fellows, go and get you each a flat stick, and I'll put what's left for you. But they ain't to be no fighting. The group broke up with a deadly, silent swiftness. Children ran to find sticks. They ran to their own tents and brought spoons. Before Ma had finished with the plates, they were back, silent and wolfish. Ma shook her head. I don't know what to do. I can't rob the family. I gotta feed the family. Ruthie Winfield, out, she cried fiercely. Take your plates. Hurry up. Get in the tent quick. She looked apologetically at the waiting children. There ain't enough, she said humbly. I'm gonna set this here kettle out, and you'll all get a little taste, but it ain't gonna do you no good. She faltered. I can't help it. Can't keep it from you. She lifted the pot and set it down on the ground. Now wait, it's too hot, she said, and she went into the tent quickly, so she would not see. Her family sat on the ground, each with his plate, and outside they could hear the children digging into the pot with their sticks and their spoons and their pieces of rusty tin. A mound of children smothered the pot from sight. They did not talk, did not fight or argue, but there was a quiet intentness in all of them, a wooden fierceness. Ma turned her back so she couldn't see. We can't do that no more, she said. We gotta eat alone. There was the sound of scraping at the kettle, and then a mound of children broke, and the children walked away, and left the scraped kettle on the ground. Ma looked at the empty plates. Didn't none of you get nowhere near enough? Pa got up and left the tent without answering. The preacher smiled to himself and lay back on the ground, hands clasped behind his head. Al got to his feet. Gotta help a fellow with the car. Ma gathered the plates and took them outside to wash. Ruthie, she called. Winfield, go get me a bucket of water right now. She handed them the bucket, and they trudged off toward the river. A strong, broad woman walked near. Her dress was streaked with dust and splotched with car oil. Her chin was held high with pride. She stood a short distance away and regarded Ma belligerently. At last she approached. Afternoon, she said coldly. Afternoon, said Ma, and she got up from her knees and pushed a box forward. Won't you sit down? The woman walked near. No, I won't sit down. Ma looked questioningly at her. Can I help you in any way? The woman set her hands on her hips. You can help me by minding your own children and letting mine alone. Ma's eyes opened wide. I ain't done nothing, she began. The woman scowled at her. My little fellow come back smelling of stew. You give it to him, he told me. Don't you go boasting and a bragging about having stew. Don't you do it. I got enough troubles without that. Come into me, he did, and says, why don't we have stew? Her voice shook with fear. Ma moved close. Sit down, she said. Sit down and talk a piece. No, I ain't gonna sit down. I'm trying to feed my folks, and you come along with your stew. Sit down, Ma said. That was about the last stew we're gonna have till we get work. You suppose you was cooking in a stew, and a bunch of little fellows stood around mooning. What'd you do? We didn't have enough, but you can't keep it when they look at you like that. The woman's hands dropped from her hips. For a moment her eyes questioned Ma, and she turned and walked quickly away, and she went into a tent and pulled the flaps down behind her. Ma stared after her, and then she dropped to her knees again beside the stack of tin dishes. Al hurried near. Tom, he called. Ma, is Tom inside? Tom stuck his head out. What you want? Come on with me, Al said excitedly. They walked away together. What's the matter with you? Tom asked. You'll find out. Just wait. He led Tom to the torn-down car. This here is Floyd Knowles, he said. Yeah, I talked to him. How ya? Just getting her in shape. Tom ran his finger over the top of the block. What kind of bugs is crawling on you, Al? Floyd just told me. Tell him, Floyd. Floyd said, maybe I shouldn't, but yeah, I'll tell you. A fellow come through, and he says there's going to be a work up north. Up north? Yeah, in a place called the Santa Clara Valley. Way to hell, and gone up north. Yeah, kind of work. Prune picking. And pears and cannery work. Says it's pretty near ready. How far? Oh, Christ knows. Maybe 200 miles? That's a hell of a long ways. How we know there's going to be work when we get there? Well, we don't know, said Floyd. But there ain't nothing here, and this fellow says he got a letter from his brother, and he's on his way. He says not to tell nobody. There'll be too many. We gotta get out in the night. Ought to get there and get some work lined up. Tom said to him, why we gotta sneak away? Well, if everybody gets there, it ain't gonna be work for nobody. That's a hell of a long way, Tom said. Floyd sounded hurt. I'm just giving you the tip. You don't have to take it. Your brother here has helped me, and I ain't giving you the tip. You sure there ain't no work here? Look, I've been scouring around for 3 weeks all over hell, and I ain't had a bit of work, not a single handhold. You wanna look around and burn up gas looking? Why, go ahead. I ain't begging you. Where that goes, the less chance I got. Tom said, I ain't finding fault. It's just a hell of a long way, and we kinda hoped we could get work and rent a house to live in. Floyd said patiently, I know you just got here. There's stuff you gotta learn. If you'd let me tell you, it'd save you something. If you don't let me tell you, then you gotta learn the hard way. You ain't gonna settle down 'cause there ain't no work to settle you. And your belly ain't gonna let you settle down. Now that's straight. Wished I could look around first, Tom said uneasily. A sedan drove up to the camp and pulled next to the tent. A man in overalls and a blue shirt climbed out. Floyd called to him. Any luck? There ain't a hand turn of work in the darn country, not until cotton picking. And he went into the ragged tent. See, said Floyd. Yeah, I see, but 200 miles, Jesus. Well, you ain't settling down no place for a while. Might as well make up your mind to that. We better go, Al said. Tom asked, when is they gonna be work around here? Well, in a month the cotton will start. You get plenty of money. You can wait for the cotton. Tom said, Ma ain't gonna want to move. She's tired out. Floyd shrugged his shoulders. I ain't trying to push you north. Suit yourself. I just told you what I heard. He picked up the oily gasket from the running board and fitted it carefully on the block and pressed down. Now, he said to Al, if you want to give me a hand with that engine head. Tom watched while they set the heavy head gently down on the head bolt and dropped it evenly. Have to talk about it, he said. Floyd said, I don't want nobody but your folks to know about it, just you. And I wouldn't have told you if your brother didn't help me out here. Tom said, well, I sure thank you for telling us. We got to figure it out. Maybe we'll go. And Al said, by God, I think I'll go if the rest goes or not. I'll hitch there. And leave the family? Tom asked. Sure. I'd come back with my jeans plumb full of Jack. Why not? Ma ain't gonna like no such thing, Tom said. And Pa, he ain't gonna like it neither. Floyd set the nuts and screwed them down as far as he could with his fingers. Me and my wife come out with our folks, he said. Back home, we wouldn't have thought of going away. Wouldn't have thought it. But hell, we was all up north a piece, and I come down here, and they moved on. And now God knows where they are. Been looking and asking about 'em ever since. He fitted his wrench to the engine head bolts and turned them down evenly. One turn to each nut. Around and around the series. Tom squatted down beside the car and squinted his eyes up the line of tents. A little stubble was beaten into the earth between the tents. No, sir, he said. Ma ain't gonna like you going off. Well, seems to me a lone fella got more chance of work. Maybe, but Ma ain't gonna like it at all. 2 cars loaded with disconsolate men drove down into the camp. Floyd lifted his eyes, but he didn't ask them about their luck. Their dusty faces were sad and resistant. The sun was sinking now, and the yellow sunlight fell on the Hooverville and on the woods behind it. The children began to come out of their tents and to wander about the camp, and from the tents the women came and built their little fires. The men gathered in squatting groups and talked together. A new Chevrolet coupe turned off the highway and headed down into the camp. It pulled into the center of the camp. Tom said, Who's this? They don't belong there. Floyd said, I don't know. Cops, maybe. The car door opened, and a man got out and stood beside the car. His companion remained seated. Now all the squatting men looked at the newcomers, and the conversation was still. The women building their fires looked secretly at the shiny car. The children moved closer with elaborate circuitousness, edging inward in long curves. Floyd put down his wrench. Tom stood up. Al wiped his hand on his trousers. The 3 strolled toward the Chevrolet. The man who got out of the car was dressed in khaki trousers and a flannel shirt. He wore a flat-brimmed Stetson hat. A sheaf of papers was held in his shirt pocket by a little fence of fountain pens and yellow pencils, and from his hip pockets protruded a notebook with metal covers. He moved to one of the groups of squatting men, and they looked up at him, suspicious and quiet. They watched him and did not move. The whites of their eyes showed beneath their irises, for they did not raise their heads to look. Tom and Al and Floyd strolled casually near. The man said, You men don't want work? Still, they looked quietly, suspiciously, and men from all over the camp moved near. One of the squatting men spoke at last. Sure, we want to work. Where's that work? Tulare County. Fruits open up. Need a lot of pickers. Floyd spoke up. You doing the hiring? Well, I'm contracting the land. The men were in a compact group now. An overalled man took off his black hat and combed his long black hair with his fingers. What you paying? He asked. Well, I can't tell you exactly. About 30 cents, I guess. Why can't you tell? You took the contract, didn't you? That's true, the khaki man said, but it's keyed to the price. It might be a little more, it might be a little less. Floyd stepped out ahead. He said quietly, I'll go, mister. You're a contractor and you got a license. You just show your license and then you give us an order and to go to work and where and when and how much we'll get and you sign that and we'll all go. The contractor turned, scowling. You telling me how to run my own business? Floyd said, We're working for you. It's our business too. Well, you ain't telling me what to do. I told you I need men. Floyd said angrily, You didn't say how many men, and you didn't say what you pay. God damn it, I don't know yet. If you don't know, you got no rights to hire a man. I got a right to run my own business my own way. If you men want to sit here on your ass, okay, I'm out getting men for Tulare County. Going to need a lot of men. Floyd turned to the crowd of men. They were standing up now, looking quietly from one speaker to the other. Floyd said, Twice it now I fell for that. Maybe he needs 1,000 men. He'll get 5,000 there, and he'll pay 15 cents an hour. And you poor bastards, he'll have to take it because you'll be hungry. If he wants to hire men, let him hire 'em and write out and say what he's going to pay. Ask to see his license. He ain't allowed to contract men without a license. The contractor turned to the Chevrolet and called, "Joe." His companion looked out and then swung the car door open and stepped out. He wore riding breeches and laced boots. A heavy pistol holster hung on a cartridge belt around his waist. On his brown shirt, a deputy sheriff's star was pinned. He walked heavily over. His face was set to a thin smile. "What you want?" The holster slid back and forth on his hip. "Ever seen this guy before, Joe?" The deputy asked. "Which one?" "This fellow." The contractor pointed at Floyd. "What'd he do?" The deputy smiled at Floyd. "He's talking red, agitating trouble." The deputy moved slowly around to see Floyd's profile, and the color slowly flowed up Floyd's face. "You see," Floyd cried, "if this guy is on the level, would he bring a clap along?" "Ever seen him before?" the contractor insisted. Seems like I have. Last week when that used car lot was busted into. Seems like I seen this fella hanging around." "Yep, I swear it's the same fella." Suddenly, the smile left his face. "Get in that car," he said, and he unhooked the strap that covered the butt of his automatic. Tom said, "You got nothing on him." The deputy swung around. "If you'd like to go in too, you just open your trap once more. There was 2 fellas hanging around that lot." "I wasn't even in this state last week," Tom said. "Well, maybe you were wanted someplace. You keep your trap shut." The contractor turned back to the men. "You fellas don't want to listen to these goddamn Reds. Troublemakers, they'll get you in trouble. Now, I can use all you in Tulare County." The men didn't answer. The deputy turned back to them. "Might be a good idea to go," he said. The thin smile was back on his face. "Board of Health says we got to clean up this camp. And if it gets around that you got Reds out here, why, somebody might get hurt. Be a good idea if all you fellas moved on to Tulare. There isn't a thing to do around here. That's just a friendly way of telling you. Be a bunch of guys down here, maybe with pick handles if you ain't gone." The contractor said, "I told you I need men. If you don't want to work, well, that's your business." The deputy smiled. "If they don't want to work, they ain't a place for 'em in this county. We'll float 'em quick." Floyd stood stiffly beside the deputy, and Floyd's thumbs were hooked over his belt. Tom stole a look at him, and then stared at the ground. "That's all," the contractor said. "There's men needed in Tulare County. Plenty of work." Tom looked slowly up at Floyd's hands, and he saw the strings at the wrists standing out under the skin. Tom's own hands came up, and his thumbs hooked over his belt. "Yeah, that's all. I don't want one of you here by tomorrow morning." The contractor stepped into the Chevrolet. "Now you," the deputy said to Floyd, "you get in that car." He reached a large hand up and took hold of Floyd's left arm. Floyd spun and swung with one movement. His fist splashed into the large face, and in the same motion he was away, dodging down in the line of tents. The deputy staggered, and Tom put out his foot for him to trip over. The deputy fell heavily and rolled, reaching for his gun. Floyd dodged in and out of sight down the line. The deputy fired from the ground. A woman in front of a tent screamed and then looked at a hand which had no knuckles. The fingers hung on strings against her palm, and the torn flesh was white and bloodless. Far down the line, Floyd came in sight, sprinting for the willows. The deputy, sitting on the ground, raised his gun again, and then suddenly, from the group of men, the Reverend Casey stepped. He kicked the deputy in the neck, and then stood back as the heavy man crumpled into unconsciousness. The motor of the Chevrolet roared and streaked away, churning the dust. It mounted to the highway and shot away. In front of her tent, the woman still looked at her shattered hand. Little droplets of blood began to ooze from the wound, and a chuckling hysteria began in her throat, a whining laugh that grew louder and higher with each breath. The deputy lay on his side, his mouth open against the dust. Tom picked up his automatic, pulled out the magazine, and threw it into the brush, and he ejected the live shell from the chamber. "A fellow like that ain't got no right a gun." he said, and he dropped the automatic to the ground. A crowd had collected around the woman with the broken hand, and her hysteria increased, a screaming quality that came into laughter. Casey moved close to Tom. "You got to get out," he said. "You go down in the willows and wait." He didn't see me kick him, but he seen you stick your foot. "I don't want to go," Tom said. Casey put his head close. He whispered, "They'll fingerprint you. You broke parole. They'll send you back." Tom drew in his breath quietly. "Jesus, I forgot." "Go quick," Casey said, "before he comes to." "Like to have his gun," Tom said. "No, leave it. If it's all right to come back, I'll give you 4 high whistles." Tom strolled away casually, but as soon as he was away from the group, he hurried his steps, and he disappeared among the willows that lined the river. Al stepped over the fallen deputy. "Jesus," he said admiringly, "you sure flagged him down." The crowd of men had continued to stare at the unconscious man, and now, in the great distance, a siren screamed up in the scale and dropped, and it screamed again, nearer this time. Instantly, the men were nervous. They shifted their feet for a moment, and then they moved away, each one to his own tent. Only Al and the preacher remained. Casey turned to Al. "Get out," he said. "Go on, get out. To the tent. You don't know nothing." "Yeah? How about you?" Casey grinned at him. "Somebody gotta take the blame. I got no kids. They'll just put me in jail, and I ain't doing nothing but sitting around." Al said, "Ain't no reason for it. Go on now," Casey said sharply. "You get out of this." Al bristled. "I ain't taking orders." Casey said softly, "If you mess in this, your whole family, all your folks, gonna get in trouble. I don't care about you, but your mom and your pa, they'll get in trouble. Maybe they'll send Tom back to McAllister." Al considered it for a moment. "Okay," he said. "I think you're a damn fool, though." "Sure," said Casey. "Why not?" The siren screamed again and again, and always it came closer. Casey knelt beside the deputy and turned him over. The man groaned and fluttered his eyes, and he tried to see. Casey wiped the dust off his lips. The families were in the tents now, and the flaps were down, and the setting sun made the air red and the gray tents bronze. Tires squealed on the highway, and an open car came swiftly into the camp. 4 men, armed with rifles, piled out. Casey stood up and walked to them. "What the hell's going on here?" Casey said, "I knocked out your man there." One of the armed men went to the deputy. He was conscious now, trying weakly to sit up. "Now what happened here?" "Well," Casey said, "he got tough and I hit him, and he started shooting, hit a woman down the line. So I hit him again." "Well, what'd you do in the first place?" "I talked back," said Casey. "Get in the car." "Sure," said Casey, and he climbed into the back seat and sat down. 2 men helped the hurt deputy to his feet. He felt his neck gingerly. Casey said, "There's a woman down the row, like to bleed to death from his bad shooting. We'll see about that later. Joe, is this the fellow that hit you?" The dazed man stared sickly at Casey. "Don't look like him." "It was me, all right," Casey said. "You got smart with the wrong fella." Joe shook his head slowly. "You don't look like the right fellow to me. By God, I'm gonna be sick." Casey said, "I'll go without no trouble. You better see how bad that woman's hurt. Where's she?" That tent over there." The leader of the deputies walked to the tent, rifle in hand. He spoke through the tent walls and went inside. In a moment he came out and walked back, and he said proudly, "Jesus, what a mess a .45 does make. They got a tourniquet on. We'll send a doctor out." 2 deputies sat on either side of Casey. The leader sounded his horn. There was no movement in the camp. The flaps were down tight, and the people in their tents. The engine started, and the car swung around and pulled out of the camp. Between his guards, Casey sat proudly, his head up and the stringy muscles of his neck prominent. On his lips there was a faint smile, and on his face a curious look of conquest. When the deputies had gone, the people came out of their tents. The sun was down now, and the yet gentle blue evening light was in the camp. To the east, the mountains were still yellow with sunlight. The woman went back to the fires that had died. The men collected to squat together and talk softly. Al crawled from under the Joe tarpaulin and walked toward the willows to whistle for Tom. Ma came out and built her little fire of twigs. "Pa," she said, "we ain't gonna have so much. We ate so late." Pa and Uncle John stuck close to the camp, watching Ma peeling potatoes and slicing them raw into a frying pan of deep grease. Pa said, "Now what the hell made the preacher do that?" Ruthie and Winfield crept close and crouched down to hear the talk. Uncle John scratched the earth deeply with the long rusty nails. He knowed about sin. I asked him about sin, and he told me, but I don't know if he's right. He said a fellow's sin if he thinks he's sinned. Uncle John's eyes were tired and sad. "I've been secret all my days," he said. "I done things I never told about." Ma turned off from the fire. "Don't go telling John," she said. "Tell him to God. Don't go burning other people with your sins. That ain't decent." "They are eating on me," said John. "Well, don't tell him. Go down the river and stick your head under and whisper 'em in the stream." Pa nodded his head slowly at Ma's word. "She's right," he said. "It gives a fella a relief to tell, but it just spreads out his sin." Uncle John looked up at the to the sun-gold mountains, and the mountains were reflected in his eyes. "I wished I could run it down," he said, "but I can't. She's a biting in my guts." Behind him, Rosa Sharon moved dizzily out of the tent. "Where's Connie?" she asked irritably. "I ain't seen Connie for a long time." "Where'd he go?" "I ain't seen him," said Ma. "If I see him, I'll tell him you want him." "I ain't feeling good," said Rosa Sharon. "Connie shouldn't have left me." Ma looked up to the girl's swollen face. "You've been a-crying," she said. The tears started freshly in Rosa Sharon's eyes. Ma went on firmly. "You get a hold of yourself. There's a lot of us here. You get a hold of yourself. Come here now and peel some potatoes. You're feeling sorry for yourself." The girl started to go back into the tent. She tried to avoid Ma's stern eyes, but they compelled her, and she came slowly toward the fire. "He shouldn't have went away," she said, but the tears were gone. "You got to work," Ma said. "Sit in the tent, and you'll get feeling sorry about yourself. I ain't had time to take you in hand. I will now. You take this here knife and get them potatoes." The girl knelt down and obeyed. She said fiercely, "Wait till I see him. I'll tell him." Ma smiled slowly. "He might smack you. You got it coming with whining around and candying yourself. If he smacks some sense in you, I'll bless him." The girl's eyes blazed with resentment, but she was silent. Uncle John pushed his rusty nail deep into the ground with his broad thumb. "I got to tell," he said. "Well then tell, goddamn it," Pa said. "Who'd you kill?" Uncle John dug his hand with his thumbs into the watch pocket of his blue jeans and scooped up a folded dirty bill. He spread it out and showed. $50, he said. "Steal her?" "No, I had her. Kept her out. She was yourn, wasn't she?" "Yeah, but I didn't have no right to keep her out." "I don't see much sin in that. It's yours," Ma said. Uncle John said slowly, "I ain't the only one keeping her out. I kept her out to get drunk. I knowed they was gonna come a time when I got to get drunk, and when I get to hurting inside, so I got to get drunk. Figured time wasn't yet, and then the preacher went and gave himself up to save Tom." Pa nodded his head up and down and cocked his head to hear. Ruthie moved closer, like a puppy, crawling up on her elbows, and Winfield followed her. Rosa Sharon dug at a deep onion potato with the point of her knife. The evening light deepened and became more blue. Ma said, in a sharp, matter-of-fact tone, "I don't see why him saving Tom's got to get you drunk." John said sadly, "Can't say her. I feel awful. He done her so easily. Just stepped up there and said, 'I done her,' and they took him away, and I'm gonna get drunk." Pa stood still, nodded his head. "I don't see why you got to tell," he said. "If it was me, I'd just go off and get drunk if I had to. Come a time when I could did something and took a big sin off my soul," Uncle John said sadly, "and I slipped up. I didn't jump on her, and she got away. Looky, you got the money. Give me $2. Pa reached reluctantly into his pocket and brought out the leather pouch. "You ain't gonna need no $7 to get drunk. You don't need to drink champagne water." Uncle John held out his bill. "You take this here and give me $2. I can get good and drunk for $2. I don't want no sin of waste on me. I'll spend whatever I got. Always do." Pa took the dirty bill and gave John $2 silver. "There you are," he said. "A fella got to do what he got to do. Nobody don't enough to tell him. Uncle John took the coins. You ain't gonna be mad? You know I got to. Christ, yes, said Pa. You know what you got to do. I wouldn't be able to get through this night no other way, he said. He turned to Ma. You ain't gonna hold her over me? Ma didn't look up. No, she said softly. No, you go along. He stood up and walked forlornly away in the evening. He walked up to the concrete highway and across the pavement to the grocery store. In the front of the screen door, he took off his hat, dropped it into the dust, and ground it with his heel in self-abasement. And he left his black hat there, dirty, broken and dirty. He entered the store and walked to the shelves where the whiskey bottles stood, behind wire netting. Pa and Ma and the children watched Uncle John move away. Rose Sharon kept her eyes resentfully on the potatoes. Poor John, said Ma. I wonder if it would have done any good if... No, I guess not. I never seen a man so drove. Ruthie turned on her side in the dust. She put her head close to Winfield's head and pulled his ear against her mouth. She whispered, I'm gonna get drunk. Winfield snorted and pinched his mouth tight. The two children crawled away, holding their breath, their faces purple with the pressure of their giggles. They crawled around the tent and leaped up and ran squealing away from the tent. They ran to the willows, and once concealed, they shrieked with laughter. Ruthie crossed her eyes and loosened her joints. She staggered about, tripping loosely, with her tongue hanging out. I'm drunk, she said. Look, Winfield cried. Look at me. Here's me, and I'm Uncle John. He flapped his arms and puffed. He whirled around until he was dizzy. No, no, said Ruthie. Here's the way. Here's the way. I'm Uncle John. I'm awful drunk. Al and Tom walked quietly through the willows, and they came on the children staggering crazily about. The dust was thick now. Tom stopped and peered. Ain't that Ruthie and Winfield? What the hell is the matter with them? They walked nearer. You crazy? Tom asked. The children stopped, embarrassed. We was just playing, Ruthie said. It's a crazy way to play, said Al. Ruthie said pertly, it ain't no crazier than a lot of things. Al walked on. He said to Tom, Ruthie's working up a kick in the pants. She's been working it up a long time. About due for it. Ruthie mushed her face at his back, pulled her mouth with her forefinger, slobbered her tongue at him, outraged in every way she knew. But Al did not turn back to look at her. She looked at Winfield again to start the game, but it had been spoiled. They both knew it. Let's go down to the water and duck our heads, Winfield suggested. They walked down through the willows, and they were angry at Al. Al and Tom went quietly in the dusk. Tom said, Casey shouldn't have done that. I might have knew, though. He was talking how he ain't done nothing for us. He was a funny fella, Al. All the time thinking. Comes from being a preacher, Al said. They get all messed up with stuff. When you suppose Connie was going? Going to take a crap, I guess. Well, he's going a hell of a long way. They walked among the tents, keeping close to the walls. At Floyd's tent, a soft hail stopped them. They came near to the tent flap and squatted down. Floyd raised the canvas a little. You getting out? Tom said, I don't know. Think we better? Floyd laughed sourly. You heard what the bull said. They'll burn you out if you don't. If you think that guy's gonna take a beating without getting back, you're nuts. The pool room boys will be down here tonight to burn us out. Guess we better get then, Tom said. Where you going? Why, up north, like I said. Al said, Look, a fella told me about a government camp near here. Where's it at? Oh, I think it's full at. Well, where's it at? Go south on 99 about 12-14 miles and turn east on Weed Patch. It's right near there. But I think she's full up. The fella says it's nice. Sure, she's nice. Treat you like a man instead of a dog. Ain't no cops there, but she's full up. Tom said, what I can't understand is why that cop was so mean. Seemed like he was aiming for trouble. Seemed like he's poking a fella to make trouble. Floyd said, I don't know about here, but up north I know one of them fellas, and he was a nice fella. He told me the deputies got to take guys in. Sheriff gets 75 cents a day for each prisoner, and he feeds them a quarter. If he ain't got prisoners, he don't make no profit. This fellow says he didn't pick nobody up for a week, and the sheriff told him he better bring in guys or give his button. This fellow today sure looks like he was out to make a pinch, one way or another." "We gotta get on," said Tom. "So long, Floyd. So long. Probably see you. Hope so. Goodbye," said Al. They walked through the dark gray camp to the Joe tent. The frying pan of potatoes was hissing and spitting over the fire. Ma moved the thick slices about with a spoon. Pa sat nearby, hugging his knees. Rosa Sharon was sitting under the tarpaulin. "It's Tom," Ma cried. "Thank God." "We gotta get out of here," said Tom. "What's the matter now?" "Well, Floyd says they'll burn out the camp tonight." "What the hell for?" Pa asked. "We ain't done nothing." "Nothing except beat up a cop." "Well, we never done it. From what that cop said, they want to push us along," Rose Sharon demanded. "You seen Connie?" "Yeah," said Al. Way to hell up and gone up the river. He's going south." Was he going away?" "I don't know." Ma turned on the girl. "Rose Sharon, you've been talking and acting funny. What did Connie say to you?" Rose Sharon said sullenly, "Said it would have been a good thing if you stayed home and studied tractors." They were very quiet. Rose Sharon looked at the fire, and her eyes glistened in the firelight. The potato hissed sharply in the frying pan. The girl sniffled and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Pa said, "Connie wasn't no good. I seen that a long time. Didn't have no guts. Just too big for his overalls." Rose Sharon got up and went into the tent. She lay down on the mattress and rolled over on her stomach and buried her head in her crossed arms. "Wouldn't do no good to catch him, I guess." "No," Pa replied. "If he ain't no good, we don't want him." Ma looked into the tent where Rose Sharon lay on her mattress. Ma said, "Shh, don't say that." "Well, he ain't no good," Pa insisted. "All the time a-sayin' what he's gonna do. Never do nothing. I didn't want to say nothing while he's here, but now he's run out." "Shh," Ma said softly. "Why, for Christ's sake? Why do I gotta shh? He run out, didn't he?" Ma turned over the potatoes with her spoon, and the grease boiled and spat. She fed twigs to the fire, and the flames laced up and lighted the tent. Ma said, "Rose Sharon's gonna have a little fella, and that baby is half Connie. It ain't good for a baby to grow up with folks a-saying his pa ain't no good." "Better than lying about it," said Pa. "No, it ain't," Ma interrupted. "Make out like he's dead. You wouldn't say no bad things about Connie if he's dead." Tom broke in. "Hey, what is this? We ain't sure Connie's gone for good. We got no time for talking. We got to eat and get on our way." "On our way? We just come here." Ma peered at him from the fire through the fire-lighted darkness. He explained carefully. They gonna burn the camp tonight, Ma. Now, you know I ain't got it in me to stand by and see our stuff burn up, nor Pa ain't got it in him, nor Uncle John. We come a-fighting, and I just can't afford to be took in and mugged. I nearly got it today, and if the preacher hadn't jumped in." Ma had been turning the frying pan potatoes in the hot grease. Now she took her decision. "Come on," she cried. "Let's eat this stuff. We gotta go quick." She set out the tin plates. Pa asked, "How about John?" "Where is Uncle John?" Tom asked. Pa and Ma were silent for a moment, and then Pa said, "He went to get drunk." "Jesus," Tom said. "What a time he picked out. Where'd he go?" "I don't know," said Pa. Tom stood up. "Look," he said, You all eat and get the stuff loaded. I'll go look for Uncle John. He'd have went to the store across the road." Tom walked quickly away. The little cooking fires burned in front of the tents and the shacks, and the light fell on the faces of ragged men and women and on crouched children. In a few tents, the light of kerosene lamps shone through the canvas and placed shadows of people hugely on the cloth. Tom walked up the dusty road and crossed the concrete highway to the little grocery store. He stood in front of the screen door and looked in. The proprietor, a little gray man with an unkempt mustache and water eyes, leaned on the counter reading a newspaper. His thin arms were bare, and he wore a long white apron. Heaped around, and in back of him were mounds, pyramids, walls of canned goods. He looked up when Tom came in, and his eyes narrowed as though he aimed a shotgun. "Good evening," he said. "Run out of something?" "Run out of my uncle," said Tom. "Or he run out, or something." The gray man looked puzzled and worried at the same time. He touched the tip of his nose tenderly and waggled it around to stop an itch. "Seems like you people always lost somebody," he said. 10 times a day or more, somebody comes in and says, if you seen a man named so-and-so and looks like so-and-so, will you tell him we went up north? Something like that happens all the time. Tom laughed. Well, if you see some young snot-nosed named Connie, looks a bit like a coyote, tell him go to hell. We went south. But he ain't the fellow I'm looking for. Did a fellow about 60 years old, black pants, sort of grayish hair, come in here and get some whiskey? The eyes of the gray man brightened. Now, he sure did. I never seen anything like it. He stood out front and he dropped his hat and stepped on it. Here, I got his hat here. He brought out the dusty, broken hat from under the counter. Tom took it from him. That's him, all right. Well, sir, he got a couple of pints of whiskey and he didn't say a thing. He pulled the cork and tipped up the bottle. I ain't got a license to drink here, I says. Look, you can't drink here. You gotta go outside. Well, sir, he just stepped outside the door, and I bet he didn't tilt up that pint more'n 4 times till it was empty. He threw it away and he leaned in the door. Eyes kinda dull. He says, thank you, sir, and he went on. I never seen no drinking like that in my life. Went on. Which way? I gotta get him. Well, it so happens I can tell you. I never seen such drinking. So I looked out after him. He went north, and then a car come along and lighted him up, and he went down on the bank. Legs was beginning to buckle. He got to the other pint open already. He won't be far, not the way he was going. Tom said, thank you, I gotta find him. You want to take his hat? Yeah, he'll need it. Well, thank you. What's the matter with him? The gray man asked. He wasn't taking pleasure in his drink. Oh, he's kind of moody. Well, good night. And if you want to see if you see that squirt Connie, tell him we've went south. I got so many people to look out for and tell stuff to, I can't remember them all. Don't put yourself out too much, Tom said. He went out the screen door, carrying Uncle John's dusty black hat. He crossed the concrete road and walked along the edge of it. Below him, in the sunken field, the Hooverville lay, and the little fires flickered and lanterns shone through the tents. Somewhere in the camp, a guitar sounded. Slow chords struck without any sequence, practice chords. Tom stopped and listened, and then he moved slowly along the side of the road, and every few steps he stopped to listen again. He had gone a quarter of a mile before he heard what he listened for. Down below the embankment, the sound of a thick, tuneless voice singing drably. Tom cocked his head, the better to hear, and the dull voice sang, I've given my heart to Jesus, so Jesus take me home. I've given my soul to Jesus, so Jesus is my home. The song trailed off to a murmur and then stopped. Tom hurried down from the embankment toward the song. After a while he stopped and listened again, and the voice was close this time, the same slow, tuneless singing. Oh, the night that Maggie died, she called me to her side, and give me them old red flannel drawers that Maggie wore. They was baggy at the knees. Tom moved cautiously forward. He saw the black form sitting on the ground, and he stole near and sat down. Uncle John tilted the pint, and the liquor gurgled out of the neck of the bottle. Tom said quietly, Hey, wait, where do I come in? Uncle John turned his head. Who you? You forgot me already? You had 4 drinks to my 1. No, Tom, don't try to fool me. I'm all alone here. You ain't been here. Well, I'm sure here now. How about giving me a snort? Uncle John raised the pint again, and the whiskey gurgled. He shook the bottle. It was empty. No more, he said. Wanna die so bad. Wanna die awful. Die a little bit. Got to. Like sleeping. Die a little bit. So tired. Maybe. Don't wake me. Ed, don't wake up no more. His voice crooned off. Gonna wear a crown. A golden crown. Tom said, Listen here to me, John. We're gonna move on. You come along, and you can go right to sleep up on the load. John shook his head. No. Go on. Ain't going. Gonna rest here. No going back. No good to anybody. Just dragging my sins like dirty drawers amongst nice folks. No, ain't going. Come on, we can't go unless you go. Go right along. I ain't no good. Just a dragging my sins, a dirtying everybody. You got no more sin than anybody else. John put his head close, and he winked one eye wisely. Tom could see his face dimly in the starlight. Nobody don't know my sins. Nobody but Jesus. He knows. Tom got down on his knees. He put his hand on Uncle John's forehead, and it was hot and dry. John brushed his hand away clumsily. "Come on," Tom pleaded. "Come on now, Uncle John. Ain't gonna go. Just tired. Gonna rest right here. Right here." Tom was very close. He put his fist against the point of Uncle John's chin. He made a small practice arc twice for a distance, and then, with his shoulder in the swing, he hit the chin with a delicate, perfect blow. John's chin snapped up, and he fell backwards and tried to sit up again. But Tom was kneeling over him, and as John got one elbow up, Tom hit him again. Uncle John lay still on the ground. Tom stood up, and bending, he lifted the loose, sagging body and boosted it over his shoulder. He staggered under the loose weight. John's hanging hands tapped him on the back as he went, slowly puffing up the bank of the highway to the highway. Once a car came by and lighted him with the limp man on the shoulder. The car slowed for a moment and then roared away. Tom was panting when he came back to Hooverville, down from the road and to the Joe truck. John was coming too. He struggled weakly. Tom set him gently down on the ground. Camp had been broken while he was gone. Al passed the bundles up on the truck. The tarpaulin lay ready to bind over the load. Al said, "He sure got a quick start." Tom apologized. "I had to hit him a little to make him come." "Poor fella. Didn't hurt him?" Ma asked. "Don't think so. He's coming out of it." Uncle John was weakly sick on the ground. His spasms of vomiting came in little gasps. Ma said, "I left a plate of potatoes for you right now." Tom chuckled. "I ain't just in the mood right now." Pa called, "All right, Al, sling up the tarp." The truck was loaded and ready. Uncle John had gone to sleep. Tom now boosted and pulled him up on the load, while Winfield made vomiting noise behind the truck, and Ruthie plugged her mouth with her hand to keep from going squealing. "Already," Paul said. Tom asked, "Where's Rosa Sharon?" "Over there," said Ma. "Come on, Rosa Sharon, where are we going?" The girl sat, her chin sunk on her breast. Tom walked over to her. "Come on," he said. "I ain't going." She did not raise her head. "You got to go. I want Connie. I ain't going until he comes back." 3 cars pulled out of camp, up the road to the highway. Old cars loaded with the camps and the people. They clanked up the highway and rolled away, their dim lights glancing along the road. Tom said, "Connie will find us. I left word up at the store where we'd be. He'll find us." Ma came up and stood beside him. "Come on, Rosa Sharon. Come on, honey," she said gently. "I want to wait." "We can't wait." Ma leaned down and took the girl by the arm and helped her to her feet. "He'll find us," Tom said. "Don't you worry. He'll find us." They walked on either side of the girl. "Maybe he went to go get them books to study up," said Rosa Sharon. "Maybe he was going to surprise us." Ma said, "Maybe that's just what he done." They led her to the truck and helped her on top of the load, and she crawled under the tarpaulin and disappeared into the dark cave. Now the bearded man from the weed shack came timidly to the truck. He waited about, his hand clutched behind him, his back. "You gonna leave all my stuff? You gonna leave any stuff a fella could use?" he said at last. Pa said, "Can't think of nothing. We ain't got nothing to leave." Tom asked, "Ain't you getting out?" For a long time the bearded man stared at him. "No," he said at last, "but they'll burn you out." The unsteady eyes dropped to the ground. "I know. They done it before." "Well, why the hell don't you get out?" The bewildered eyes looked up for a moment, and then down again, and the dying firelight reflected redly. "I don't know. It takes so long to get stuff together." "You won't have nothing if they burn you out." "I know. You ain't leaving nothing a fellow could use." "Cleaned out, slick," said Pa. The bearded man vaguely wandered away. "What's the matter with him?" Pa demanded. "Cop happy," said Tom. The fellow was saying he's bull simple. Been beat over the head too much. A second little caravan drove past the camp and climbed to the road and moved away. "Come on, Pa, let's go." "Look here, Pa, you and me and Al ride in the seat. Ma can get on the load. No, Ma, you ride in the middle. Al. Tom reached under the seat and brought out a monkey wrench. Al, you get up behind. Take this here, just in case. If anybody tries to climb up, let him have it. Al took the wrench and climbed up the backboard, and he settled himself cross-legged, the wrench in his hand. Tom pulled the iron jack handle from under the seat and laid it on the floor, under the brake pedal. All right, he said. Get in the middle, Mom. Pa said, I ain't got nothing in my hand. You can reach over and get the jack handle, said Tom. I hope to Jesus you don't need it. He stepped on the starter, and the clanking flywheel turned over. The engine caught and died, and caught again. Tom turned on the lights and moved out of the camp in low gear. The dim lights fingered the roads nervously. They climbed up to the highway and turned south. Tom said, There comes a time when a man gets mad. Ma broke in. Tom, you told me, you promised me you wasn't like that. You promised. I know, Ma, I'm a trying, but them deputies, did you ever see a deputy that didn't have a fat ass? And they waggled their ass and flopped their gun around, Ma. And he said, if it was the law, they was working with it. Why, we could take it, but it ain't the law. They were working away at our spirits. They were trying to make us cringe and crawl like a whipped bitch. They were trying to break us. Why, Jesus Christ, Ma, there comes a time when the only way a fella can keep his decency is by taking a sock at a cop. They're working out on our decency. Ma said, You promised, Tom. That's how a pretty boy Floyd done. I know it is, Ma. They hurt him. I'm a trying, Ma. Honest to God, I am. You don't want me to crawl like a beat bitch with my belly on the ground, do you? I'm a praying. You gotta keep clear, Tom. The family's breaking up. You got to keep clear. I'll try, Ma. But when one of them fat asses gets into working me over, I got a big job of trying. If it was the law, it'd be different. But burning the camp ain't the law. The car jolted along. Ahead, a little row of red lanterns stretched across the highway. Detour, I guess, Tom said. He slowed the car and stopped it, and immediately a crowd of men swarmed about the truck. They were armed with pick handles and shotguns. They wore trench helmets and some American Legion caps. One man leaned in the window, and the warm smell of whiskey preceded him. Where do you think you're going? He thrust a weathered face near Tom's face. Tom stiffened. His hand crept down to the floor, and he felt the jack handle. Ma caught his arm and held it powerfully. Tom said, Well, then his voice took on a severe whine. We're strangers here, he said. We heard there's work in a place called Tulare. Well, goddamn it, you're going the wrong way. We ain't gonna have no goddamn Okies in this town. Tom's shoulders and arms were rigid, and a shiver went through them. Maud clung to his arm. The front of the truck was surrounded by armed men. Some of them, to make a military appearance, wore tunics and Sam Browne belts. Tom whined, Which way is it, mister? You turn right around and head north, and don't come back till the cotton's ready. Tom shivered all over. Yes, sir, he said, and he put the car in reverse, backed around, and turned. He headed back the way he had come. Ma released his arm and patted him softly, and Tom tried to restrain his hard, smothered sobbing. Don't you mind, Ma said. Don't you mind. Tom blew his nose out the window and wiped his eye on his sleeve. The sons of bitches. You done good, Ma said tenderly. You done just good. Tom swerved into a dirt road, ran 100 yards, turned off his lights and motor. He got out of the car, carrying the jack handle. Where you going, Ma demanded. Just gonna look. We ain't going north. The red lanterns moved up the highway. Tom watched them cross the entrance of the dirt road and continue on. In a few moments there came sounds of shouts and screams, and then a flaring light arose from the direction of the Hooverville. The light grew and spread, and from the distance came a crackling sound. Tom got in the truck again. He turned around and ran up the dirt road without lights. At the highway he turned south again, and he turned on his lights. Ma asked timidly, Where we going, Tom? Going south, he said. We couldn't let them bastards push us around. We couldn't. Trying to get around the town without going through it. Yeah, but where are we going? Pa spoke for the first time. That's what I want to know. Gonna look for the government camp, Tom said. A fellow said they don't let no deputies in there. Ma, I had to get away from them. I'm scared I'd kill one. Easy, Tom, Ma soothed him. Easy, Tommy. You done good ones. You can do it again. Yeah, and after a while I won't have no decency left. Easy, she said. You got to have patience. Why, Tom, us people will go on living when all them people is gone. Why, Tom, we're the people that live. They ain't gonna wipe us out. Why, we're the people. We go on. We take a beating all the time. I know. But maybe that makes us tough. Rich fellows come up and they die, and their kids ain't no good, and they die out. But Tom, we keep it coming. Don't you fret none, Tom. A different time's coming. How do you know? I don't know. How? They entered the town, and Tom turned down a side street to avoid the center. By the street lights, he looked at his mother. Her face was quiet, and a curious look was in her eyes like the timeless eyes of a statue. Tom put out his right hand and touched her on the shoulder. He had to, and then he withdrew his hand. Never heard you talk so much in my life, he said. Wasn't never so much reason, she said. He drove through the side streets and cleared the town, and then he crossed back. At an intersection, the sign said 99. He turned south on it. Well, anyways, they never shoved us north, he said. We still go where we want, even if we got to crawl for the right. The dim lights fell along the broad black highway ahead.